Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by Organifi. You know, the one thing that literally every single diet and nutrition expert that we've had on the show seems to agree on is that we need to eat more veg and get our greens and consume all natural products. But let's be honest. How many of us actually have the time? Well, recently I had the opportunity to meet some of the folks over at Organifi, and I've been absolutely blown away by them and their product. You see, Organifi is an organic superfood green juice powder that literally covers all your nutritional bases without having to eat 5 bowls of kale. It saves you loads of time, loads of money, and a lot of chewing. And really all you have to do is add water and drink it. So to check it out and save an incredible 20% off your first order, visit Organifi.com. That's Organifi.com and use coupon code SUPERHUMAN at checkout. This episode is brought to you by Become a Super Learner, the Masterclass. You guys, if you have ever wanted to learn things faster, to read faster and waste less time reading boring textbooks, if you've ever wanted to have near perfect memory for names, numbers, anything you want to learn, and expand your mind and retain information in a way that you never thought possible, well, then the Become a Super Learner Masterclass is exactly what you've been looking for. It's a 10-week program developed by myself and my mentors alongside some of the world's best memory experts and world record-holding memory champions. It'll take you from zero to super learning hero in just a matter of 10 weeks in about 30 minutes a day or less. Now, you can go ahead and sign up for a free trial with no credit card required. All you have to do is go to jle.vi/learn. And if you choose to pick up the full course, you will also get an incredible discount for listeners of this podcast only. So please make sure to check it out and support the show. And on to today's episode. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode. You guys, before we get started, I want to read you an awesome review from HS100 from the UK. It's a little bit of a long review, but he says that the podcast is everything you need. If you've made the commitment to making progress in your life and pushing it to the next level, then Becoming a Superhuman has everything you need. My experience is once you begin, you find your needs take you to different areas of self-improvement, and BSH has it all covered. He goes on to list different examples of how the show has impacted him or her in his or her life, and then says, my only advice is that each episode has more actionable tips than most similar podcasts, so make sure you have a piece of paper. It's certainly a game changer and very probably a life changer. Wow. Well, thank you so much for that awesome review. I think you can hear just how much it's made me smile, so I really appreciate it. And if you guys have not yet left a review, please do. And if you have left a review, then share this week's episode with your friends or on social media or with your email list or whatever. On to today's episode. You guys, this week we are joined by Elaina Love from Pure Joy Planet and the Pure Joy Culinary School. And she's really one of the pioneers in the growing raw plant-based diet movement. You see, guys, like so many of the nutrition experts that we've had on the show, Elena also focuses on low carb and high fat and a diet free from artificial junk and processed foods. No surprises there. But what makes Elena unique is that she is known really as one of the more respected authorities, both in the raw and in the vegan communities. Though, as I kind of found out throughout the interview, her diet actually isn't as black and white or extreme as you might expect. Now, because we've never done a show about veganism, much less about raw food, I really wanted to understand that side of the story a little bit better, and I wanted to challenge some of my own assumptions and some of the long-held beliefs about diet and nutrition that I reinforce every single week. Now, in the episode, we talk about dietary suggestions, we talk about the benefits of eating raw foods, and we open up this whole new entire world that I never knew about, a world of enzymes and why you should start maybe considering to take them. I really expected actually to find Elena to be much more extreme and set in her opinions, but I was actually surprised to find that we agreed on almost everything. With that said, I did learn really a great deal from her in this episode, and it was actually pretty surprising given just how many episodes we've done on diet and nutrition. So I came away with a long shopping list of new products and supplements that I want to try out and a bunch of new ideas that I want to test in my own life. So I think you guys are really going to get a lot out of this episode. I think it's going to change the way you think about what you eat, and I think you're going to love it. So without any further ado, let me present to you Miss Elaina Love. Elaina Love, welcome to the show, my friend. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. So before we hit record, you were mentioning how you are enrolling in the Super Learner course. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited to learn.
So Elena, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your work. I tried to cover it a little bit in the intro, but I'm sure I did not do you justice.
Okay, well, let's see. 2017 is now my 20th year after discovering a raw food diet 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've been at this for 20 years, and I'm not doing just all raw foods anymore, but that was how I started, and I got into it for health reasons. And I feel like synchronicities play a huge part in our lives. And it was at one of those times in my life where I just felt like I need something new. I need something different. I need something different about my health. Like I was kind of going to an osteopath. I had some health issues, trying to figure out some problems with allergies and just yeast in the body. And then this book just kind of lands in my lap, and I read it about cleansing and raw foods, and I just took off with it. I'm one of those people that kind of jumps in with both feet when I find something that sounds like it's going to work. So I just went 100% raw for 5 years, raw vegan, and
wow,
did a ton of cleanses. My first cleanse, actually, after the first 30 days, I felt like a brand new person. Like my cells were already like rejuvenating and transforming, and I had more energy than I could ever remember. And I was only in my 30s at the time. And, I was like, wow, like I just have all these things I want to do. So I started a business of catering these foods because there was people in my area. And I'm sure you've had this situation where you meet people and they're like, what are you doing? I want to do what you're doing. And that was basically what was happening. Like I had all this energy. I was just super happy. I was losing weight, and people were like, what are you doing? So then I just started making food for people, and it kind of just unfolded over the years of my business grew into ultimately a culinary academy. It started out with just recipe books and me teaching like on weekends. And then I turned it into a full-time career of teaching this for a lifestyle.
Incredible. So tell me a little bit about the health issues, if you don't mind, because we're all about becoming superhuman. So I'm very curious to hear what brought you to the raw food diet and what it was. I mean, you must have been suffering a reasonable amount to have been able to just dive in to, such an extreme lifestyle change.
Yeah. And it is extreme. I will say that to people who are listening. They're like, no, I can't do raw foods. They're too extreme. It is extreme, but I believe it's a good temporary cleansing diet that's super healing. So we can get more into that. But I got into it because I had systemic candida, systemic yeast. A lot of you guys have probably heard of candida. It's where your bad bacteria overgrows your good bacteria, and you start to experience symptoms like I had really bad eczema up and down my arms, the kind that like would bleed when you would itch them, and just always had rashes on my arms. I had really bad chronic lower back pain. I had just brain fog all the time, just hard to remember things, was tired in the afternoon. I didn't realize this had anything to do with diet, but I had serious menstrual cramps, the kind where I'd have to take, like I would take way overdose on Motrin just so I could pass out and wake up, hopefully feeling better. Wow. So like I would have one full day of not going to work or just debilitation around just hormonal imbalance. And that all just started to fix itself. And there was things I didn't realize was diet related, things like carpal tunnel in my wrists from years of doing weights and different things, probably improperly. But the reason I knew it was working is when I would, how we all do when we start on a trajectory, you go full on and then you like have a little relapse. And then I would notice if I would eat, let's say gluten, my wrist would start to hurt again. My back would start to hurt again. The symptoms would come back really quickly. So that's how I knew what I was doing was working. And so it was a pretty awesome journey.
Yeah, we're huge fans of the A/B testing, try it and then try what isn't working.
Yeah.
Okay. So you dive straight into this. You said when you started out, you were kind of more on the extreme side of raw food vegan. I think there are a lot of reasons why people gravitate towards that. There's the obvious ethical reasons. The meat industry is disgusting, both ethically and in terms of the quality of the product, I think, on average that comes out. There's the environmental reasons, and there's beliefs about health reasons. So it sounds like most of your focus was around your personal health issues. Would you say that's fair?
That's definitely true. I mean, of course, like you, I do not want to eat animals that have been tortured, or I don't want things to suffer. But my main goal at that time was just all about, I just want to feel good. I want to fix my health.
Definitely. So this is a controversial one, I have to say, because I've been kind of brought up and indoctrinated by a lot of the paleo guys. And Rob Wolf's story of how he was not raw food vegan, but he was a vegan. And so he was eating a ton of grains, ton of gluten, and just getting sicker and sicker. So I'm interested to hear, given your experience, 20 years, and you've worked with thousands of people, talk to me about really the health benefits of the vegan diet.
Okay. Well, I do want to start by saying that, yes, I understand that going vegan can actually be detrimental to your health. And that's actually what happened to me before I found the raw food. So at first I was like, I need to go vegetarian because that's the healthiest thing to do. And then I started eating a ton of soy, a ton of gluten, breads, all that fake seitan stuff that I call Satan because that's what it is. And I was getting worse. I was gaining weight. I was getting really bad acne. I was like, okay, something's not working here. And so when I found raw foods, it was just like, okay, this is an answer to my prayers because I had an allergy to soy. I had an allergy to eggs. I had an allergy to a lot of the foods I was eating. So to answer your question, I think a regular vegan diet, I call it junk food veganism, is not a health diet. And a lot of the people that get into it for that reason are doing it for the animal rights. And I totally respect that. But that's not my camp. I don't hang out with people that are doing just the vegan to be vegan. And that's a great journey. But for me, it's more about being conscious of all of our choices, including if you are going to eat animal products, just to make the most conscious choice that you can, as you know, and you've talked about, like finding the most sustainably, healthily raised meats and fish and whatever it is you're getting. And like, if you're getting eggs, find someone that has their own chickens and things like that. I have actually helped people heal on a vegan diet by doing a raw diet, because what we do is we eliminate grains. That's the first thing we do, is we eliminate all grains, which, as you know, is a huge part of healing the body, is getting rid of these grains. And especially in the U.S., I don't know how it is in Israel, but in the U.S., our grains are so full of mold and bacteria. And what they're doing is the grains are being stored in silos. And then when the bacteria starts to grow, like the mold, the yeast, they spray it with chemicals. So everything that people are getting is just full of mold, and then antifungal things have been sprayed on it. I'm like, no wonder people are getting sick.
Absolutely. Not to mention the fact that the actual wheat that we're producing is not in any way genetically engineered for health benefits or for anything besides shelf life and rapid growth. And I think that's a huge reason why actually, people say like, well, gluten was never an issue. We've been eating bread for 15,000 years. It's like, yeah, but there's more gluten in our wheat now than ever before.
Right. And I think people were eating gluten and eating bread, but they weren't eating it like Americans do today, or like people do today, where they're eating it 3 meals a day, or if not 5 with snacks. Like, it's in everything. And when you start looking at labels, if you're buying packaged foods, it's in licorice, it's in sauces, it's in everything we're eating. So our system never gets a chance to heal. It never gets a chance to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. We're just slamming our bodies day in and day out.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you and I are on the same page, because I often people ask me, well, what about veganism? And people kind of come down on the whole paleo thing. And I often say almost exactly what you just said, which is to be, I love the term, the junk food vegan is a great ethical choice, but you're sacrificing your health for the health of another creature. And if you want to do that, that's all well and good. But I'm really glad that you and I see eye to eye on that. And it seems that so many of the experts that we've had on the show see eye to eye on that, that the issue is not so much the eating of animal products in terms of the health. It's all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's all the craziness. So it's just about being conscious and aware of our choices is in the end.
Totally. And I think one of the things that I often think about is ultimately what we need to do is get to an ethical animal products industry. And that can mean a lot of things. It can mean grazing our animals, but it can also mean lab meats, in vitro meats, 3D printing steaks and stuff like that. And I always say to myself, so Israel right now has the highest proportion of vegans per capita, or I believe it's Tel Aviv does. So India has obviously the most vegetarians, but Israel has the highest number of vegans. And I always say to myself, what is that saying to the meat industry? It's saying, look, you guys don't have a budget to innovate because we just don't want to eat meat. Whereas if we all direct our funds to grass-fed meat, we start cutting profits away from the big industry, kind of the meat industry, and start saying, look, we're willing to spend money if you're willing to invest in creating ethical sources of animal products. I think that's a huge step forward. And that's using your wallet to vote for change.
I would love to see that happen, especially because, as we know, one of the side effects of eating meat is our environment.
Totally.
I mean, we have to make changes. And that's what I love about what you're doing and what so many people I know are doing is by doing what we're doing and spreading the word, no matter why someone goes vegan or no matter why someone stops buying farm-raised animals, it's giving the same message. We're voting with our dollars. We're voting for change.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. If I cooked you up a beautiful in vitro steak 10 years from now that actually never came off the hoof but came out of the Petri dish, is that a yay or an A for you?
I would try it. I mean, I don't have anything against that. If I knew that there was something that was going to sustain my body and be good for me and not make me feel bad, then I would eat it.
That's cool.
That's basically, my choices have to do mostly with that. Like, how am I going to feel after I eat this? And I know for me, like right now, if I were to eat beef, because I haven't eaten it in years, the only animal products I eat right now is wild caught salmon from Alaska. And I digest that really well and I do well with it. And I don't know how I would digest beef at this point just because it's been so long. And I know it is kind of, our bodies kind of adapt to what we're eating. And people ask a lot about that, about raw foods. Well, isn't it hard to digest? And yes, it is at times if your body's not used to it. So I think with anything, it's adaptability.
Exactly. So I always thought that cooking and fire really allowed humans to develop in the way we did. So like you said, making digestion easier, obviously killing off all these dangerous pathogens, when you live without refrigeration, and making food really more stable for storage. So sell me a little bit on this idea of raw food. I mean, I have to say I eat about 60 to 70% of my fruits and veggies I eat raw. So I think I'm probably already there just on the laziness factor. But tell me a little bit about the benefits of raw.
Yeah, I mean, you do have a point with that, like why we started cooking. However, now, especially in the US and, most countries, we have refrigeration, we have clean environments, we're able to eat more of our foods raw. So why eat raw? The biggest one is if you're in a situation in your life where you need to heal your body. I mean, cancer is rampant, as we know, as is diabetes and a lot of these issues people are having. So when you start eating foods that are high in enzymes, now when you cook food, it destroys the enzymes. Anything heated over 118 degrees Fahrenheit kills the enzymes. It's just like humans. Like we wouldn't want to hang out in a sauna that was 120 degrees for more than an hour or two. So our food is similar. Whatever we're putting into our body is creating our life. Like we are what we eat. So when we're eating, a high percentage, I'm not going to say 100%, but a high percentage of foods that are tampered with, like what we would find in nature, like naked and alone in nature, what would you do? You'd find an apple tree, you'd pick it, you'd eat it. You might eventually cook, create a fire down the line if you could figure out how to do all that and catch the animal and everything. But most of your diet out of ease, like you're saying, would be probably raw foods just because it's easier to pick out herbs and roots and just eat them right on the spot, especially if you're hungry. So what I've noticed with my body and with people that I've coached is when we start putting these high enzyme foods in our body, it actually is able to start healing things in the body because raw foods have the enzymes available in them to digest it. So like if you eat a raw apple, it has the enzymes in it to digest it. So that's one part. And then just along the same lines, it doesn't necessarily mean like if the food's raw or cooked, but there's more minerals and vitamins available before you heat the food. As we know, especially with fats, it destroys the vitamin E content right away. And once you kind of get the fats more and more heated to a certain temperature, it destroys a lot of the healing benefits of the fat, especially in plant-based fats. So that's another reason to eat. Like I even tell people, like if you're going to cook your food, like steam your broccoli, steam your vegetables, and then pour the olive oil or pour the coconut oil over afterwards. So you're not destroying the good properties of the fats.
Right. I mean, I always knew that a lot of the cooking processes we do leach out the nutrients. I know some vitamins are very stable at high heat, but yeah, vitamin E, all of these kind of like, I'm really interested, I guess, in the enzymes. I think we talk a lot about the microbiome on the show, and that's an obvious benefit for eating raw and slightly dirty. To get the bacteria, right. Like don't be scrubbing your mushrooms.
Don't scrub your food.
Yeah. Exactly. I had a friend who just got off, I don't know why, but they put him on antibiotics for a very long time. And I was telling him, like I would start kind of reintegrating some dirt into your diet. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, no, like eat carrots, eat potatoes, eat things that have been in the ground and have a ton of good bacteria. But I've never really heard about the enzyme argument. So talk to me a little bit about what these enzymes are and how they're different from, the microbiome or the nutrients or the minerals or vitamins and stuff like that.
Okay, so enzymes, there's three types of enzymes. One is the raw food enzyme or the food enzyme, which I just talked about, that's inherently available in food when it's raw. The second is digestive enzymes. Now, a lot of you guys and a lot of people listening might have taken like, I've taken papaya enzymes or I've taken some kind of digestive enzyme. Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about, but I'm not really talking about the papaya enzymes because I call that like expensive candy because it's usually hardly any enzymes in it and it tastes sweet. I'm talking about it can come from animals. Like maybe you've heard of people taking pancreatic enzymes or liver enzymes that come from animals, people that are healing that part of their body. So that's one type of enzyme. But the plant-based enzymes that usually are created from sprouts because sprouts are one of the highest enzymes foods there is because they're so tiny and they're just like full of life at that point. So when you take these digestive enzymes, it helps you to digest the food. And as an experiment, if anybody's curious, you could take these digestive enzymes and pour it over a bowl of cooked oatmeal and literally in front of your eyes, watch the oatmeal start to liquefy. Wow. So yeah, it actually starts to break down. So what's in enzymes, depending on which ones you buy, usually like the ones I sell and the ones that I take are full spectrum enzymes. So that means they have the amylase, which is this like the sugar digesting enzyme, which is naturally our saliva has ptyalin in it, which starts to naturally digest sugars and simple starches when we put them in our mouth. And then there's like lipase, which is for fat. And then there's protease, which is for protein. And I believe that a lot of, from what I've read and the studying that I've done, a lot of our health issues are due to having a lot of undigested proteins in our body and undigested proteins in the blood. So by taking digestive enzymes on a regular basis, if someone were to start doing it as therapy, you could start noticing like you have more energy after you eat if you feel sluggish. Because a lot of people don't combine their food properly. Maybe they'll eat meat and potatoes together, which is the worst food combination, right? You probably know that.
Yeah.
So if you take a digestive enzyme afterwards or even before the meal, you'll notice, I don't get sluggish when I take the enzymes. What's happened for me is if I combine 3 fats in a meal, that's too many for my body. So I might get sleepy after a meal. So I'll just pop a few enzymes, usually like 5. And lo and behold, within 10 to 15 minutes, I'm energized again. I'm feeling good. And I know it was just the food was just slowing me down because 80% of our energy goes towards digestion. Most of us are not tired. We're just digesting.
Very interesting because I'm always thinking about taking probiotics and stuff like that, other things to help me digest my food better because I do think that's kind of one of the big final frontiers of nutrition, is understanding how different people's bodies digest different foods based on things like the microbiome. But I've never thought about taking enzymes, and I think that's a really interesting area. I mean, I know like Beano and stuff like that that's supposed to help digestive discomfort. I guess all that really is enzymes that you need to help digest those foods.
Yeah, and Beano is a great one. That's a good start if someone has Beano, especially if you're eating starches. It's not as good with proteins, but it's great with starch. But I would suggest definitely looking into some different types of digestive enzymes and just try different ones and see which one works for you. And there's never a bad time to take an enzyme. I always tell, because I do a lot of cleanses with people, and they say, well, what if I forget to take it? I'm like, just take it anytime, even an hour after your meal, just take it. It's never going to hurt. You cannot overdose on enzymes. Nothing bad's going to happen. And I want to talk about the third kind of enzyme, which is systemic or metabolic enzymes. And this is like, you've probably heard of the enzyme serapeptase. And serapeptase is what breaks down fibrin in our body. And fibrin, like for a lot of women who get the menstrual cramps and get a lot of just hormonal uterine problems, it's due to an overproduction of fibrin. So taking systemic or metabolic enzymes on your cycle could be really helpful. The other thing is if you have scar tissue or if you have undigested proteins, which you wouldn't really know if you did or didn't, but if you've eaten a poor diet for years, you might. This is going to help start to liquefy and clean out a lot of the old stuff in your body. And I recommend taking metabolic enzymes, or if you just get something like serapeptase by itself, you can also get something called wobenzyme, which a lot of athletes take because it helps with joints. And most athletes get sore joints because of inflammation. So these wobenzymes or these metabolic enzymes are going to help break down the fibrin in the joints. I've seen people actually heal scar tissue by doing a fast with these metabolic enzymes, because since the body's not working on digesting food, it's able to actually go in and clean out and heal parts of the body. And everything's always wanting to repair itself. I believe that our DNA is perfect and it knows exactly what it's supposed to do. And as soon as we stop putting, and this is another reason I love raw foods and I love what I call clean eating, because when we stop putting in the junk and the crap, our bodies can actually heal themselves, and it knows what to do. As soon as you stop putting in bad stuff and you put in things that are going to cleanse and heal your body, you're going to have a transformation. I don't believe it's ever too late.
That's really interesting. You just opened up like a whole new kingdom, because we're always talking about supplements, nutritional supplements, and, you know, things that give the body kind of an extra edge. But I've never thought about enzymes. And I think so many people like myself kind of forgot about that after high school biology. Like there is this whole category of proteins. Like, you know, we have all of the amino acids that we take and all the fats and all the lipids and all that. But there's this whole category of proteins called enzymes, you know, that help your body break stuff down when it needs to and create reactions when it needs to. And we'll definitely be linking to the Wikipedia page for enzyme in this blog post.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, just look into it. If anybody's listening and is like, I'm curious, just you're going to find so much information. And I just want to say one more thing about the metabolic enzymes, because I'm like a kind of a health geek. I mean, you are too. I know, like when I find something that works, I'm like, I'm going to try it like this, and now I'm going to try it like that, and I'm going to do this cleanse, and I'm going to try that. I'm like my own human experiment for the last 20 years. So I've kind of tried so many things. And the one thing that I love doing right now is taking these metabolic systemic enzymes on an empty stomach in the morning when I wake up. And I have an infrared sauna in my backyard. So I crank that up and I take the enzymes and I sit in there for between 20 and 40 minutes. And I let those enzymes go to work on my body while I sit still. Like I'm not using it for energy. I'm not using it to digest food. And I'm just letting it, like in my mind, I'm just imagining that it's healing and cleansing anything in my body, even though I feel great. Like there could be something it just needs to work on. So I kind of just let it do its little healing work in the morning. And I take about 10 of them at a time. Whoa. Like I mega dose on them. There's no side effect other than you might see in your urine, you might see things that look like little pieces of gelatin coming out. It's like really small, but that's actually the fibrin breaking down. So if you look in the toilet and you're like, oh, what? There's like foam or there's something weird looking in there. That's actually your body releasing excess fibrin, which I think is super cool.
Wow. Okay, interesting. And by the way, you said that you guys sell these enzymes. If people want to check those out, where should we send them? Yeah,
just purejoyplanet.com. And click on the store and go and just type in enzymes and we have the digestive ones and the metabolic ones.
It's so interesting. I ended up ordering. I was having some unpleasant side effects of my highly plant-based diet. And I ended up ordering some stuff, but I wish I'd known about this. I think I'm going to pick up a couple of bottles here.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about candida, because I have suffered from it for years and years and years. It's notoriously hard to get rid of. And, I went on antibiotics when I was 15 years old, I think. Mm-hmm. My tongue has always been white every morning ever since. And I've kind of settled into the fact that I'm never going to get rid of it, but it doesn't flare up. And fortunately, I'm a male, so I don't need to worry too much about it. But I know that, my history with ADD is probably connected. And anytime I have sweet cravings, I know that it's connected. So how did you manage to get rid of it? And also for anyone in the audience who might have never heard of candida, like what are some of those warning signs and side effects that they should maybe look out for?
Yeah, I'll totally go into that. So I, like you, was an antibiotic child. People always say to me, oh, you say you never get sick. You must have a really strong immune system. You must have really good genes. And I'm like, you have no idea. I was like the sickliest child. I was born left-handed, which my mom always says, you have a weaker immune system. And I don't know if that's true or not. But that being said, I had my tonsils removed. I had tonsillitis. I had bronchitis. I had hospitalized multiple times. Antibiotics just constantly. I had the ear infections, the kind where they get so bad they have to puncture your ears. My throat was always swollen, like that kind of sore throat where you can't even swallow. You're so miserable. And of course, I got 7-Up to heal that. Wasn't that awesome? But anyway, so yeah, I had candida since I was born. My mom said I had thrush, which is another symptom of candida. So if you have a baby, or if you know that you as a baby had chronic diaper rash, my mom said that her doctor even yelled at her because my diaper rash was so bad. So I was just born with it, the white tongue, all of that stuff. I didn't realize it until, like I said, I found raw foods and kind of got it in my 30s and kind of discovered, oh, wow, I can actually fix my body. I don't have to have eczema the rest of my life. So one of the symptoms is acne. I was getting the cystic kind of acne, the big welts that come on your back and your face. Any kind of eczema, if you have any kind of skin condition, it's usually tied to yeast in the body. So a lot of itching and rashes and hives and things like that. For women, it can be tied definitely to cramping and menstrual problems. Also bloating. If you have constant bloating, it could be a sign of an overgrowth of yeast. Low immune system, you just get sick more often. Yeah, like you said, a super huge craving for sweets. Like I was one of those, if I had a choice, I would always go for donuts and fried foods are going to be the worst possible food you can eat for candida. For men, symptoms are things like jock itch. For women, it's if you get the chronic yeast infections. For men, also what I notice is a lot of men tell me, oh, I don't have any problems with yeast, but their toes have fungus on them. So my theory with that is women don't usually get the toe fungus, but we get more of the yeast infections. So it's like the yeast is kind of dropping. I don't know, this is just a theory, but it's dropping down to kind of like the lower half of the body. So that's why with men, it always ends up being this toe fungus. And I see a lot of that. Or if you just get athlete's foot a lot, that's a sign of yeast overgrowth. Warts can also be a symptom of having too much yeast, fungus. They're all kind of tied together, fungus, mold, yeast in the body. So those are kind of some of the symptoms. And the brain fog for me was a big motivation. Like I wanted to think clearly. I wanted to have energy. But I also was glad to get rid of all the itching. I haven't gotten a yeast flare up in a long time, but if I do eat something, like with maple syrup in it or too many dates or whatever, just my body at night will start to itch. Like if you're laying in bed and you kind of just feel itchy all over, that's another symptom of overgrowth of yeast. Wow. And like you said, the white coated tongue as well.
Yeah, that's the big one. And I guess everyone has candida in their body.
Yeah.
And everyone has a slight bit of whiteness on the tongue, I guess. But if you have those other symptoms, it sounds like that's when it's time to really take action.
Right. And I call it surfing the edge. And I'm sure you looked at this concept where we want to be as healthy as we can be. And there's times when someone's going to offer me something that has maple syrup or has honey or something that's sweeter than what I'm used to eating because I'm into low carb. And I'll have it knowing, okay, I could probably get away with this once or twice. But then you'll start to see a little bit of symptoms show up. And that's when you know you need to go back to the clean eating. So I call it surfing the edge because we're not 100% purists just eating leafy greens out of the garden all day long. Like we want to indulge, we want to have fun foods. So just finding what works for you and like knowing how to clean it up. Like you're saying with probiotics is a really great way to start with healing the candida, just inundating your system with good probiotics. And I'm sure there's some that you've recommended, but there's a lot of great ones on the market. And I think rotating them just to kind of give yourselves different kinds of probiotics, making your own sauerkraut and coconut yogurt and coconut kefir, things like that, just to keep your system filled with the good bacteria. And you're right. I think candida is a natural thing in the body, and it's designed to help clean up when we eat bad foods. But because the world now has a bad diet, we're overfeeding the bad bacteria. And that's all it is just stop feeding the bad stuff. Start feeding the good stuff with things like prebiotics. Now, prebiotics are things like asparagus is a prebiotic, jicama is a prebiotic. There's a lot of kind of cruciferous types of vegetables that are prebiotics. That means they feed the good bacteria. Even yacon root syrup or yacon root is a good one if you've heard of that. So doing that, but I don't recommend someone to go, because take it from me, learn from my experience, to go on this full-fledged kill the candida campaign. Because what happens is after about 2 weeks of misery, pain, and suffering, you just can't take it anymore.
It's so
It's
bad.
kind of like, yeah, you're like, I have to eat something. So to me, I'd rather sneak up on it by just, and this is what I found to work for me in the long run, because I have experimented on every possible way imaginable. What I say by sneaking up on it is like, don't eliminate all fruit and all sweet stuff and everything, all grains, all at the same time. Like start by just, if you're still eating glutinous grains or any kind of grains, like start with that. And then the next thing would be like, okay, I'm going to stop eating sugars and fried food and processed foods. And most listeners are probably already have done that. So the next thing would be to stop eating super sweet fruits like dates and bananas and mangoes and all the high glycemic fruits, and just keep it with the berries and the green apples and lower glycemic fruits. And don't take anything that's going to actually kill the candida. Just take probiotics. Because what happens is if you just start with the kill campaign, you're fighting your own body, and it's just a losing battle, because you've got to have homeostasis at some point. Your body needs to stay in equilibrium and balance. And we don't want to just bombard our system. We want to like be loving and gentle to it. And it's starting with one thing and kind of working on. Then when you've done that and you feel really good, oh, I feel great, my brain's clearing up. Okay, let's look at the next thing that you could do. Maybe now you could do a liver cleanse, because liver is really tied to parasites, yeast, candida, fungus. The liver needs to be clean to be able to digest the food well and process a lot of that stuff. You could also look at, am I combining my foods properly? Let me research food combining. But just as with any learning, just start with one thing, with what makes the most sense now. And then just, you've got all the time you need, take a year to figure it all out and kind of.
I really like that approach, Elena, because I went on at the request of a homeopathic healer that I trust very much. I went on this full campaign against the candida, and the only carbohydrate I was allowed to eat was one pear or one green apple a day. And basically when the candida dies off, it pumps all this toxin into your bloodstream, makes you feel bad. And of course, it's made of, most people don't realize this, but the candida itself is kind of armored with a similar stuff, enamel really, that covers hard-shell crabs.
That's right.
It's really damn tough. You can't just scrape it off and it'll be gone. And you just feel awful. So I eventually gave up. And that's why I said, I've resigned myself to just always having this.
Yeah.
But I like this approach of gradually over time. And I know, as you said, with the maple syrup, I know that if I go right now and I have even a couple sips of Gatorade or Coca-Cola, within, 30, 40 minutes, my tongue feels fuzzy. Because it's just always
swollen.
there. Yeah. Well, just the fuzz starts to grow. Yeah. It's really gross.
Yeah.
So I have to be on this low carb, low glycemic diet.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would recommend for you is some charcoal too. If you do have one of those things, okay, I drank some Coca-Cola or whatever it is, even maple syrup, take a couple charcoal capsules, because that'll suck things up as well.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. The activated charcoal.
Okay, activated charcoal. I'm adding that to my shopping list.
Yeah, and I would tell people don't just start taking it every day, because it can suck up minerals as well. So I experimented with that, and I started to get foot cramps because I was taking too much, because it was drawing out magnesium. So just do it if you've had alcohol, or I went out for someone's birthday and I had cake, take the charcoal, because that's going to suck stuff up. And the other thing is, do you know about nopal cactus?
I don't.
Okay. Do you know a company called Health Force Nutritionals?
I don't yet.
Big in the US. I love their products, but they have these capsules called nopal cactus. I mean, it's a known fact that people that eat a lot of these nopal cactus, and I live in the desert where they grow, can get rid of diabetes. And so if you take these capsules after you've had sugary sweets or any kind of foods that are going to feed yeast or candida, it's actually kind of a natural laxative without being a laxative. It's more of like, think about taking aloe vera. It just makes things slippery, but it also helps stabilize and neutralize any sugar or sweets that you've consumed.
Interesting.
I love that as well.
Interesting. And you also mentioned, you said there are a lot of good brands of probiotics. Which ones do you recommend?
Okay, I have two in my fridge right now. One is called the number one, 1MD, and I order that online. And you can't order it on Amazon. I have to go through their company. It's just 1MD.
Wow, I was just typing it into Amazon as you were saying that.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, I know. I want to get it through Amazon, but that one I don't think they have on there. And I order 6 bottles at a time because that's the best price. I feel really good when I take them. I take 3 at night and sometimes 3 at night and 3 in the morning. That's kind of a lot, but that's me. And then you get better bowel movements. You get them more often. Your food digests better. Your stomach is flatter, like all the things that we love, right?
Wow.
And the other one, and you've heard of this one, I'm sure, is Ultimate Flora. And there's lots of different. Have you heard of Ultimate Flora?
I haven't. I'm not so strong
Being
on
in Israel, you probably don't know you haven't seen anything because you're not going to Whole Foods and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, so Ultimate Flora is a huge company, and that one you can get on Amazon, and they do have some that do not need refrigeration. So if you're traveling, I would suggest getting the 15 billion, not the 50, but the 15, because like anything, like I mentioned, if you're going to start bombarding your system with 50 to 100 billion flora, you're going to get candida reaction symptoms. You're going to get Herxheimer's die-off. You're going to feel crappy, like you were saying. Your brain's going to be like, ah. So start with the 15. You can get some that don't need refrigeration. Take 2 to 3 of those in the morning on an empty stomach and at night on an empty stomach. And you can switch around and sometimes try the 50 billion or the 100 billion, especially if someone has cancer or if they have super bad candida, like the type that you've got rashes breaking out, you're really miserable. Take the higher doses, but just know that you are going to suffer a little bit with the die-off.
All right. I'm going for the 50 billion. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, one thing I want to say too about this, and I don't know, like on your podcast, if you've gotten into enemas or cleansing too much, and we could do a whole nother interview just about cleansing sometime if you want, but doing enemas and doing coffee enemas is really going to help. So if you do decide, okay, I'm going to conquer this candida, I'm just going to take this flora, I'm going to stop eating anything sweet, doing the coffee enema where you hold it for 15 minutes in the morning is going to super help, because what it does is it gets the liver to release a lot of the bile, and it just starts clearing out all the ducts in the liver to help release the toxins quicker. So you don't have to suffer as much with it floating around in your bloodstream.
Wow. I would have to say that wouldn't be the craziest thing I've done that someone's recommended on this show. And I've actually heard a lot about coffee enemas, from the Gerber diet. I believe it's the Gerber diet, right?
It's the Gersh one.
Yeah, there it is. The one who's in Mexico now.
Yeah. Carrot juice and coffee enemas. Yeah.
Exactly. And so apparently that works, eh?
It does. I've used it a lot during liver flushes and liver cleanses.
Interesting. Okay, so I think we should do another episode on that. Definitely.
Yeah, let's do it. I really love talking about that.
Awesome.
The funny thing I wanted to say is you're like, what's the craziest thing you've ever done? I'm like, gosh, like if a mainstream person asked me that, I mean, we've done so many crazy things, right? Like
totally. For a while there, I was going to get like RFID chips installed in my hands. Like one of the guests almost convinced me to do it. I didn't end up doing it because I don't know how to program them, but there's some pretty crazy stuff that I've considered.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So tell me this, Elena, as a chef, and honestly, I think you're the first chef that we've had on the show. So I'd love for you to share with us just kind of some general tips, like low-hanging fruit ideas for making meals that stand out. I think you're probably supremely qualified since you're not cooking with MSG and all the garbage that can be used to make food so tasty.
Yeah, I'm not. So I'm not afraid of salt. I use high mineral salt, like the Himalayan salt, the Celtic sea salt, also known as gray salt, or sometimes it's called like French salt. And then there's one called real salt in the U.S. that comes from Utah. And these are all, what they all have in common is they're highly mineralized. There's also things like Algean pink salt and all those. So yes, if it has a color, it's probably good for you. It's got over 82 minerals in it. White salt has been stripped. So don't be afraid of salt, but use good salt. And that's actually going to hydrate you and keep you healthy. Onion powder is one of my favorite go-tos for making things taste good. So if I'm making like a sauce, like what I like to do, because I do eat cooked food too, I'll steam up some veggies and then I'll make a really yummy I'll use coconut butter and sun-dried tomatoes, and a little curry powder in the blender to make a paste or like a sauce to go over the steamed veggies. And I'll throw in some onion powder, like a big tablespoon of onion powder into it. And it just, I call it filling in the gaps. It just makes everything taste better. You just feel it's like sweet and it's savory and it's like all the flavors all at once. I also love cumin powder. That's just my go-to for my spice. I love it. I make my own chili sauce by just throwing a bunch of fresh chilies that, when they're in season in the blender with some red bell peppers, some apple cider vinegar, some salt, and maybe a pinch of honey or coconut sugar just to kind of for a tad of sweetness. And that'll last like 8 months in your fridge because of the vinegar. And you can throw a couple cloves of garlic in and make your own hot sauce. You do not need to buy the stuff in the stores. It's full of white vinegar and like all the bad stuff, preservatives usually. Another go-to for me that I absolutely love is white miso made from chickpeas. It's a miso paste, so it's high in enzymes. It tastes like cheese. So if people love cheese, but they don't want to eat cheese, it's a really great one to add to like even a soup that you're blending or a salad dressing or anything like that, like just a little scoop of miso, or add it in like, because I make my own nut cheeses out of macadamia nuts. Add that into some blended up cashew or macadamia nut cheese. And that one makes everything taste better too.
Wow. Those are some solid tips. I definitely need to buy some onion powder because I mean,
yeah, Amazon, you buy a pound because once you start eating it, you're going to love it. And one tip I want to tell you guys on the onion powder is whatever you do, don't pour it over a steamy pot. Don't stick a wet spoon in there. And if you do buy a pound bag of onion powder, keep it really well sealed and only take out like a week's worth of onion powder and put it in a jar at a time because it cakes up really quickly when it doesn't have the anti-caking agents in it. And as you guys know, always buy organic, but otherwise you're just going to end up with a block of onion powder that's kind of hard to use. So just keep it air sealed.
Yeah, especially with the humidity we have here, it's all my spices turn to chunks.
Yeah. Well, try that trick of not pouring it over a hot stove. And like a lot of people don't realize that all the steam is going up into the jar.
Totally. All right. So that's pretty good homework. I wanted to ask you for some more homework, maybe more on the trying something new side or on the picking up a product that you think is really important. So what's some homework that we could assign to the audience this week to do before next week's episode?
So for trying something new, I would say if you're not meditating, this has nothing to do with food, but if you're not meditating or doing some kind of awareness practice, start with even 5 to 10 minutes a day. I find that YouTube has a lot of great meditation videos or just mindfulness practice. That could make a huge difference in your overall awareness throughout the day and your energy throughout the day. Another one is just pick one thing to eliminate this week or one thing to add. So the one thing I would say to add, if you're not doing it already, is start your day with warm lemon water. This is going to just like take a glass mason jar, fill it with tepid warm water, not boiling water, and like a half a lemon. And try and get as much in your system on an empty stomach as you can. So if you can kind of use a straw and guzzle half that jar, it's going to create amazing bowel movements. If you feel tired and you're like, I need coffee, start with the lemon water because you're going to feel your cells literally, if you've ever done live blood cell analysis, you've seen it on the screen. Your cells literally get rounder and plumper when you hydrate. So imagine, as you're drinking the water, imagine your cells getting round and plump and kind of bouncing into each other and being all happy. So that would be what I would say to add. And what I would say to eliminate is pick one thing. If you're still eating grains and gluten, decide to eliminate it, or even decide to eliminate one kind of grain. If you're eating a lot of bread, try that and do a substitute. And I've got tons of recipes on my website for substitutes.
Awesome. And why the lemon in the water? Does it have to do with the acid?
No, actually, even though lemon tastes acidic, it's actually an alkalizing fruit. So it's going to alkalize your body. It's going to hydrate your cells quicker. So going back to that whole raw food thing, when you drink water that's been filtered, it's dead. It has no life in it. It's not like a bubbling river water. It's completely devoid of any kind of energy. So adding a live food, whether it's a cucumber slice or lemon to it, it's going to re-energize it. And then lemon is also well known for cleansing the kidney or the liver and the kidneys. So liver is our biggest, hardest working organ in the body. We just really need to help it in any way we can. So by doing lemon water, you're like giving your liver some love in the morning and just saying, I love you.
Love it. Love it. All right, cool. So I know we're coming up on time here. I want to ask you just about some books that have really impacted your life. If people want to learn more about any of the topics that we've talked about today, or just in general, books that have impacted you as a human.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big reader, so I'm always reading something. Right now, I'm reading a book by would love to remember her first name, but her last name is Northrup. She's Christiane Northrup's daughter, and it's called Money, A Love Affair. So that one's really interesting. It's just kind of having us take a different look at money. And diet health books that I have loved over the years and that I continue to go back to. I like stuff by, The Grain Brain. That book is really great. If you're still curious about gluten and grains, read either Grain Brain or Wheat Belly. Those are both great. And then the author of Grain Brain, I think that's Mark Hyman, did a second book called Brain Maker, where he talks about, like you're talking about, the gut biome and how it's tied to the brain and how everything we eat and everything in our gut is directly tied to our brain and our mental capacity. So those are books I kind of like to go back to. I keep them on audio, so when I'm traveling, I can listen to segments and just kind of keep myself in that conversation.
Totally. All right, cool. So just to kind of wrap out the interview, first, I want to ask, where can people learn more and get in touch with you, give you an opportunity to share kind of social media or websites or wherever we should send people?
Cool. Yeah. The best place to go is my website, which is purejoyplanet.com. And from there, you can link to my blog, my Facebook page, check out my free recipes. And then if on my YouTube site, which you can link to from my website, I have lots of free videos. And I actually even have a free juicing course right now that we're offering. So yeah, just go there as a resource, get on my mailing list so that you can get updated recipes and any new things we have coming out. We have lots of online courses that we're offering right now.
Awesome. So definitely check that out, everyone in the audience, and we will link to that from the blog post, obviously. Elena, I want to ask you kind of the final question here before we get moving. If people take away just one message and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that message to be?
I would say the number one thing is to love yourself. Really check in with the talk that you're telling yourself every day. Because the more we love ourselves, the more we're able to love everyone else in the world. It's just that ripple effect, and it needs to start with you. It needs to start with you just checking out your mental, what you're saying to yourself on a daily basis and how you're feeding yourself. Because when you love yourself through feeding yourself well, it just ripples out and everything in your life starts to change.
That is a brilliant note to end on. Elena, I want to thank you so much for your time and definitely for sharing your wisdom. I learned a lot in this episode, and that's always fun.
Yay. Well, thanks for having me. And I look forward to another.
Yeah, I'm putting it on our calendar now that Mina should reach out to you for doing another episode in a few months.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thanks so much.
Absolute pleasure. You take care.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody or you are somebody or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.